hoping you're going to walk away with today. And understanding that narrative writing helps us to define ourselves, discover our place in the community with others, and navigate future possibilities. I also hope that you'll walk away with the idea that through the use of personal experience, because I'm going to focus real heavily on the personal narrative component, because I feel like that's the springboard into all that imaginative stuff, and you'll get to see a few of those examples as well. Students can explore the story world and produce narratives that powerfully shape their identities. And the last one, and we'll focus a lot on these, just the strategies, the stuff that we can give to kids so that they can actually craft writing. When you're at the elementary level, what I struggled with the most was asking kids to write, and they would just sort of stare at the blank white paper and really not necessarily know what to put down unless I came forth with some strategies in terms of helping them. So that's kind of where we're going to go. Essential questions. Why write? That's what I want you to think about today. How does narrative writing empower our knowledge of self and community? And what strategies are going to best assist our writers? I'm going to ask you to do a lot of writing today. I'm not really sure how much writing that they so. I'm going to ask you to do a lot, and here's why. Mike Angelotti was one of the co-directors out of the Oklahoma Writing Project, and I love the guy. It's a little bit abstract, random, but we got along okay. But here's what he said to me once, and it was just in a personal communication. I was terrified to write, absolutely petrified to write, especially anything that had to do with my own personal life. And as I was in conversation, he said, teachers who write seriously that which they ask their students to learn can best help students grow as writers, because these teachers are learners themselves and have written through the rough spots, the hundreds of intricate maneuvers that a writer must make to become more effective. And as teachers write in depth, they discover the dynamic of the subject matter they teach, as do students who do the same thing. And one of the facets of the writing project, one of the things that we stand on is this. To be a teacher of writing, you need to be a writer yourself. And so whatever you do, I want you to just constantly think about, as you are teaching students, what model can you show? I noticed when I walked in, Paula was saying, well, this is kind of my example. Do that for your kids, because they need to see that you aren't afraid of it. One of my biggest mistakes when I started teaching writing was to ask my students to do a lot of writing, yet I never really did that myself. And I was kind of a fraud, and they knew it. So, it didn't show up. That's interesting. Okay, so we're going to look at the stuff stories are made of. So one of the main things that I really start off with my elementary students is helping them see that they actually have a story to tell. Here's why. Our little kids don't know the power of story for their own lives yet. They do know the power of story if you tell them the Three Little Pigs and they can name favorite stories. I mean, Corbin and Elliot, my little twins at home, they already love story. They will go to the little book bin and pull out their favorite stories. Wheels on the Bus, that's one of their favorite ones. It's really a song, but to them it's a story. So they can do that. But to know that they actually have stories dwelling in them, we have to really help them find that. So here's some of the things that we do. Oh, yours is different than mine, Paula. No, I'm just wondering, it may be like that on a lot of slides. We might end up having to switch. We'll have to see. We'll see if it works. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Nancy Atwell. She talks about writing territories. This is simply a list of different places where kids tend to drift a lot in their writing. For Matthew, you're going to notice that it has to do with this hammer. He kept bringing the hammer back, and you'll see why. Topic T-charts. I love this one. I got this idea from Steve Pihai. He actually has Teaching That Makes Sense. It's actually a website. It's a really good one. It'll be on your bibliography. He gave me the idea of making a T-chart and putting on one side a topic, and on the other side it's opposite. So things I've lost, things I've found. Those types of things. Things that I love, things that I hate. So having kids make lots and lots of T-charts, or just lists. I've done this with kindergarten and first grade, and they can do it. They need help, but they can do it. And when they can't think of the actual construction of the letters, I let them use pictures. Heart maps are another one, and you can see this one's a little bit more advanced. This is from a 7th grader, I believe, and this one is actually from a 2nd grader. So having them heart map, and you notice that the 2nd grader used a lot of pictures to help get those ideas out of what was in her heart. A heart mapping are those things that tug at us. They're the things that really define who we are, that dwell inside. Mentor text, I cannot stress this enough for all writers, but particularly our youngest writers. One of the things I do with When I Was Young in the Mountains, I have them go through and think of the same scenarios from When I Was Young in the Mountains. and they get to think about when they were young, which is really hysterical when you think about a kindergartner saying when I was young, but they do it. It's absolutely endearing. The other book I love, and I told Jackie about this one years ago, Wilfred Gordon MacDonald Partridge. It is one of my absolute favorites. I use this K-12. So when I have worked with high schoolers, I use this book. This book goes through, and it's about a little boy trying to figure out what a memory is. And so he goes around and he interviews a whole bunch of different people at the old folks' home that live next door, and he keeps asking them, what's a memory? And they'll answer with different ideas. Something that makes you warm, my child, something that makes you warm. And then the next person maybe says something that makes you cry, my child, something that makes you cry. And so then the kids go through and they list ideas that, again, match this mentor text.
What's that one called again?
Wilfred Gordon MacDonald Partridge. It's a long, because and the reason it's called the lady that he is trying to help find the memory, it's Nancy Allison Delacourt Cooper, and she has 4 names just like he does. So it's quite endearing. And then I can draw on my own personal experience and again do my own modeling in relationship to the lady having lost her memory, because my grandmother actually had Alzheimer's, and so I can help draw parallels for my students in terms of my own experience, and again, bring my own personal narrative into the story as well. I'm trying to see, okay, the last one, I wanted to save the memory box for last. I'll caution you on this one too. I finally went out, and I think I went to McDonald's finally and asked if I could have a whole bunch of their Happy Meal sized boxes. The reason why, I started with memory boxes and just told the kids that they needed to make a box and fill it up with any objects, like actual concrete objects that meant a lot to them. And I had a kid bring in a box, I swear, that was this tall and this big around, so that he could bring in this really, really, really big trophy. So I learned, after a couple of years of making that big faux pas, to actually give the kids a more manageable box that they could bring. And in that box, if they had something like this ginormous trophy, they could take a picture of it, or they could sketch it out so that it could still go in the memory box, but my room would actually still have a teachable space to it. So the memory box simply is filled with concrete objects. You can limit it if you'd like, 5 to 10. I usually try and get my real little kids to at least do 5 to 10. 5, I think, is pushing them. A little over 10 might be too much, and then they aren't using that thinking skill of what is actually most important in terms of their memory. If I'm doing 4, 5, 6, I let them go 10 to 15, because then that pushes them a little bit further. If you get much beyond those realms, what I have found is that they just throw everything in the box, or they'll bring in a stack of photographs this big. And it's not necessarily really getting them to focus in on what's most vital and important to them. So I want to show you Matthew's memory box list. The directions for this are simply to take out your objects. They go around, they get to share with students, they get to talk to other people about it, and then they go back to their desk and they simply start writing out whatever it was they put in their memory box. And the directions that I give are, if you have more to say, if for some reason there's a particular object or a particular photograph that triggers you wanting to say more about it, go ahead and just do that in your writer's notebook. And so here's Matthew's. So here's my memory box that Miss T made us bring in. That was my name a long time ago. I got a baseball card that my Uncle Steve gave me of Derek Jeter. I have a picture of my family at Christmas time that we sent out to a bunch of people from when I was still in 3rd grade before my dad left. It has my mom, my dad, my sisters, and me in it. I looked stupid in the picture, I think, but I remember we were all happy then, or at least I thought we were. I was probably in 4th grade when my mom and dad split up. The next picture is of Murphy, my dog. I didn't name him, my sister did. I would have picked a much cooler name for a dog than Murphy. My last picture is one of my dad. I don't get to see him very much because he lives in Stillwater now with his new family, and that's all the pictures. His were mostly pictures. He didn't really have much to bring in. And I have my grandpa's hammer. It's my favorite memory box thing because it reminds me of him. He gave it to me before he died. I really miss him because he was so cool. I wish he hadn't died. He died of a heart attack. The only thing I have left to remind me of him is this hammer. Before he died, we fixed his fence together. So I want you to pay attention to that hammer right there, because you're going to notice it keeps coming back. This was his writing territory. This was his way of beginning to negotiate who he was and who he was in community with other people. So one of the things that I would posit to you, I know that Paula talked about it begins with trouble. She did that prompt with you guys. One of the things that I find really works well with elementary kids, and I do this again with my middle school kids too, but one of the things I would think works really, really well is to help kids develop their character. Whether that character is themselves or whether it is another person that they're imagining. Here's why. Kids like really big things to happen in stories. How many of you have ever noticed that? The car, hi, I haven't seen you in forever, sorry. All of a sudden, you have this character doing something, turns a corner, and the car explodes. Or, they are suddenly in a race car driving thing or something. But it has to be this big stuff plotline thing. And it doesn't really necessarily go with the characters, so you don't really care much about the story because you don't care about the character. And so one of the things I really like to have my students hone in on is understanding that characters drive the story. And when I begin to do this with my kids, I notice that they begin to really spend more time developing the character, and I see less exploding bombs, fighting. I can't even name all of them. If you've taught elementary, you know what I'm talking about. I see it less in middle school, but it's really dominant. I remember one time a student was writing about his hamster, and suddenly his hamster, while he was on that spinning wheel that hamsters have, he was spinning so fast that it broke through the glass cage, and as he got out, he realized he was super hamster. So, it's a great idea, and then the hamster was fixing all of these problems that didn't really facilitate the growth of the story, or the hamster, quite frankly. So one of the things that I think is really important is to help kids craft that. So here's what I start with a lot of times, and with kids I would be different about it, but I bring in a bag of something, and I make up a story, of course. Hey, I was coming to school today and I noticed this thing on the side of the road, or hey, I was out by the school, I was walking around and I noticed this backpack, or this weekend I was sitting at Starbucks drinking my coffee and I looked over and someone had just left their bag there and I don't know what to do. It's quite a dilemma. Let's figure out who this bag belongs to. And then I proceed to take everything out of the bag and they have to craft the character. So I'm going to take stuff out of the bag. If you would like, make notes because I'm not going to pass all of it around. It would just be too hard. It's minutiae. But what I'd like you to do is think about who is this person? Where did this person come from? And think about everything from the actual container to the stuff inside, because sometimes there's conflicting evidence as well. And then I'll kind of show you another component of it too. First of all, there is a, Nugo protein bar. Interestingly, there are also 2 Snicker bars, bite-sized, a bottle of Aleve, a lighter, Play-Doh, Via Columbia coffee. Oh, 2 packages of that. A brochure for Eagle Crest Resort. It looks like it's in Oregon. Diaper, baby wipes. See if there's anything over on this side. Oh, diapers. A bag of writing utensils, tape, paper clips, and an eraser. Ticket stubs to movies. Lipstick. Band-Aids. Open tissues. And the interesting part of that is this part was completely empty. The only thing in here were the baby wipes. And then there's one last compartment back here. 2 ticket stubs to Wicked. So here's what I'd like you to do. I want you to think about who this person might be. Who's this character based on the stuff that came out of it. Think about even the container and the fact that this part was empty. And just take some time to maybe make some notes real quickly, and then we'll go on and we'll talk about how we can craft that character out a little bit more. Feel free to talk and interact with one another.